what are you going to do?
Well, now you give me $700 billion immediately.
Why?
Well, because we need it, Brian. I mean, the system needs money. Imagine the economy as a body. It needs blood pumping around it, Brian.
You haven't got it?
We haven't got any money, no.
Why not?
Well, we lost ours. I've just been explaining that.
You don't have mine.
Mom! Brian won't let me play with his stuff.
It's the only money I've got.
You're in for it.
It's never been challenged. You put money in the bank and they loan it out. That's what we were taught. It's just not how it works. It's just it's extraordinary. Hey guys, I want to see if I can just find.
We in the US, etc., is adequate. And now for the EFT group, Mr. Farage.
Another one bites the dust. Country number 4, Spain, gets bailed out, and we all, of course, know that it won't be the last. Though I wondered over the weekend whether perhaps I was missing something. Because when the Spanish Prime Minister, Mr. Rajoy, got up, he said that this bailout shows what a success the Eurozone has been. And I thought, well, having listened to him over the previous couple of weeks telling us there wouldn't be a bailout, I've got the feeling after all his twists and turns, he's just about the most incompetent leader in the whole of Europe. And that's saying something, because there's pretty stiff competition. Indeed, every single prediction of yours, Mr. Barroso, has been wrong. And dear old Herman Van Rompuy, well, he's done a runner, hasn't he? Because the last time he was here, he told us we'd turned the corner, that the euro crisis was over, and he hasn't bothered to come back and see us. You know, I remember being here 10 years ago and hearing the launch of the Lisbon Agenda. We were told that with the euro by 2010, we would have full employment, and indeed that Europe would be the competitive and dynamic powerhouse of the world. By any objective criteria, the euro has failed, and in fact there is a looming, impending disaster. You know, this deal makes things worse, not better. 100 billion is put up for the Spanish banking system, and 20% of that money has to come from Italy. And under the deal, the Italians have to lend to the Spanish banks at 3%, but to get that money, they have to borrow on the markets at 7%. It's genius, isn't it? It really is brilliant. So what we're doing with this package is we're actually driving countries like Italy towards needing to be bailed out themselves. In addition to that, we put a further 10% on Spanish national debt. And I tell you, any banking analyst will tell you 100 billion doesn't solve the Spanish problem. It would need to be more like 400 billion. And with Greece teetering on the edge of euro withdrawal, the real elephant in the room is that once Greece leaves, the ECB, the European Central Bank, is bust. It's gone. It has 444 billion euros worth of exposure to the bailed out countries. And to rectify that, you'll need to have a cash call from Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Greece and Italy. You couldn't make it up, could you? It is total and utter failure. This ship, the Euro Titanic, has now hit the iceberg, and sadly, there simply aren't enough lifeboats.
What are they, some European party thing
There's
going?
in Britain, it's British guy.
Yeah. That's a European forum though. So, yeah, the important thing is that, you know, it's often difficult to take the illogic of the system. And you think, well, it must only be illogical in certain places. It can't be illogical everywhere. Surely at the top end, somebody knows what's going on. And that's where it's really great to watch stuff like that, because it just goes to show you that they are absolutely clueless. And that thing by, whatever her name is, that I mentioned earlier about the, what you said, and, you know, just at all costs maintain confidence. That's ultimately what it comes down to. They have nothing else to do other than to maintain confidence, to do whatever they can to reassure people that it's okay. And those people who know it's going to come crashing down, who are in the circle, so to speak, are therefore encouraged not to play it down too much, because we need some alternative solution. Meanwhile, the commercial banks just carry on rampantly doing what they're doing. They just continue.
It's like JP Morgan, they lost that 2 billion. I spoke to one of the employee guys who works for them the other day. He says there's going to be more like 4 billion.
Yeah, no, it's been, I think it's almost 5 now. Yeah. No, it's just trading losses. That's all. But remember, it's all connected. So once they start investigating that, it all starts to come down. Remember, The movie Margin Call is really recommended, especially after the seminar, because you're in this kind of space. The movie is set 24 hours before the banking crash. And what happens is it's a fictitious bank, but you can almost kind of guess who it is, one of the big guys. Essentially realizes that what happens is the market capitalization, in other words, the net value of the company, is enormous, billions, if not trillions. Sorry, let me rephrase it. The entire exposure that the bank has is trillions and trillions. It's enormous. Their market capitalization, which is essentially, let's call it for want of a better term, their value, is worth a lot lower than that. Because they are so leveraged and so exposed, a small change in the percentage of the margins or anything starts shifting, alarms start flagging, and they could actually make losses that are greater than the value of their entire company. Now this is where the major issues start happening. So in the movie Margin Call, they've got to make a decision. What do? They've been party to this information. They've got it now. They know that there's a crash going to happen. It's not far away. What are they going to do? And I'll let you watch the movie for the answer. Margin Call. Yeah. There's some good movies. Margin Call. The other one I recommend, which is the one which is Matt Damon narrates. Does anyone remember what it's called? Inside Job. Thank you very much. That's also very, very good. Margin Call's great. And they're all star-studded cast. It's Jeremy Irons and Kevin Spacey. It's related. It's not like we can say, it's just this little division in Standard Bank. They have no idea what's going on. The rest of the company's fine, don't worry. How many times do we hear that excuse? What? They were doing that? That's terrible. That's not a reflection on the rest of our organization. No. We'll sort them out. We'll sort them out, don't worry. And then just go back to sleep. Everything's fine. Everything's cool. We hear that all the time. And it's nice to now see that it's all the way from the smallest micro loan all the way up to the highest echelon of the Eurozone. The illogicness, whatever the word is just rampant. It doesn't work. Yeah?
In the humorous clip before that one, the guy commented that this is a much higher risk model of moving money and generating flow in the economy. We've, in South Africa, had Stokvel loaning and funeral funds that continue to work for people at a lower level that doesn't get into the banking system and go into that high-risk system. And possibly some of what might help us start grasping the reality of this is to know that it's based on what we need, a system that we do need to be able to borrow money or share and lend and pay back. And the loan part of the monetary system may well be something that we will need to continue with. But the high-risk model of the monetary system that is benefiting the banks is something that we want out of.
Yeah, but you've got to remember, mate. You've got to remember that it's important to understand that if you're selling a high-risk asset, the commissions are much higher. Guys make a lot of money out of them. That's essentially how it works, doesn't it? The higher the risk, the higher the return. The bigger the commissions for all of us and the bigger the bonuses. That's essentially it. So, until...
Don't give the people the power to manage their own money in small community-based sharing schemes or mutual funds, because it means that our commissions and our profits are going to diminish. So the system, in some sense, has a model in it that has a service to us.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Except we've given it away.
Look, I hear exactly what you're saying. And I mean, the small community-based things, I mean, there was a great thing that happened in America a while ago where they started pulling money out of banks and putting them into local credit unions, for example, which was great. They were trying to create a mini run on the banks to withdraw deposits. Because remember, a small withdrawal of deposits leads to huge cut higher up because you need those deposits. But what ends up happening is what we said earlier. It's all about the reverse occurs. So you have almost like a reversal. Instead of the banks going stopping lending, they just carry on doing what they're doing or stop trading. And then if they want reserves, they just phone up their mates and just organize it. So the reserves are chasing, the tail is wagging the dog. That's the way that I see it. Yep.
Just to add on that, is that, for a long time it struck me, you look around the world is mad. Is that an accident? No, it's not. It's because it's meant to be mad. That's what most people aren't grasping. It's not mad coincidentally, it's mad because it's meant to be. So you take, by way of example, the run on Lehman Brothers and all of those things. So a run on a bank, as we said, before such and such a time, there were only $12 to every 1,000 available if everybody wanted their money, and it crept up to 70, whoopee-doo. But the facts are, they've been printing money for as long as the bank has been in existence. Now when there's a run on it, why don't they just print more? And the bottom line is because they choose not to. Somebody chooses not to. So all of those, BlackRock, Lehman Brothers, all of those guys, they could have actually given everybody their money. But somebody made a decision not to.
It's a very interesting point. Now, remember, if you don't have people in the system, if the banks could look after themselves, there would be no need for humans, which is a bit of a problem for the banks because they feed off ultimately human labor. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there must be many solutions to these problems. Why are they choosing the solutions that are destined to put people into austerity? How many of you have even heard of the word austerity until a year or so ago? It was never a word that was even, it wasn't even in our vocabulary. I didn't even know if it was in the dictionary. Was it in the dictionary? I actually checked it out. So there is a word called austerity. I mean, I never even know the thing existed. It's slavery. And the other thing is, who is going to believe that somehow it's only temporary? Don't worry, it's only temporary. You know, we're all schizophrenic at the end of the day. Yeah?
We keep asking these questions, why, because it doesn't make any sense. And that's because people who are so power-driven operate off greed, and that greed can only exist and can only flourish if we all live in a fear-based society. So to keep us in that constant fear and slave-driven mentality, there's no need to print more money because that would be a solution. That would solve the problem, and then they wouldn't know. So,
the big question is who's they?
But I honestly believe that there's a few families really controlling globally what happens with the world's economy. And if you look at our banking system, and we mentioned it earlier about the UK and India and everywhere else, all operating on the same, why is it all the same? You know, why is there this serious similarity globally that's going on?
Yeah, well, look, it's definitely there's definitely something strange going on, and you can, I mean, the research is all there in terms of the various global elite families and the banking families, etc., etc. There's no way you can deny it. How they've managed to rope in so many other pawns to do their bidding is another question as well, but they've managed to do it.
All you've got to do is look around. Look at your average municipalities, your average complex public institutions. Okay, the people running those places. And this is the proof that there's a hidden hand working somewhere, okay? Because those people couldn't organise a piss up in a room. And those things still continue to function. Dysfunction, but function. So there's a hidden hand behind there somewhere that keeps things going.
Yeah, that's
because it sure as hell isn't the people running it.
No, I agree. You know what? I do agree that the people that are running it are not the most organised. However, there's a certain something about the people on the grassroots level. I mean, you know, Telkom arrived twice, you know, to come fix our ADSL. We've had Johannesburg Water arrive to come fix our stuff. The actual people that arrive are fantastic. They're brilliant. They're actually, like, really, they're keen, and it's almost like, I think the only reason things are still going is because that there's a certain echelon of humanity that will just carry on doing it. They will be the troopers. They will carry on, you know, sweeping the streets and cleaning the crap and all that kind of stuff. And they'll carry on because it just seems like the right thing for them to do. And no matter how much the top stuffs it all up, at the end of the day, they'll just still carry on. And maybe that's on a time limit as well. Because let's face it, the entire middle class of the world is disappearing. We're getting very rich and very poor. You know, South Africa is an example of maybe where that's not the case, certainly now, but it's only a matter of time before that changes as well. But again, not to get too politically minded, I want to, before we go on another break, and then we're going to go into our last session. What time? Is it 5 o'clock now? Now, are you serious? Alright, okay, this is like gone way more. Okay, I'm going to show you another video, then I'll... Guys, are you okay to hang on a little bit longer? There's still a few more things I want to chat about. Okay, alright, let me play this.
Now, the banks have criticized the move.
Now, what I find very interesting, this is from RT, Russian television, but it's really cool because there's a South African girl that's presenting it, which is really cool.
Now, the banks have criticized the move, saying Moody's decision is backward-looking. Is it?
Look, the banks are dead. You know,
Sorry, guys, what you're talking about is Moody's downgraded, I think, 15 or something British banks. A couple of days ago. This is actually from Friday night.
Now, the banks have criticized the move, saying Moody's decision is backward-looking. Is it?
Look, the banks are dead. You know, the famous Russian short story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, about a dead man who hears everyone talking around him. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the global banks. They're dead. They're corpses. No amount of aerosol trying to make the stink go away is going to change that. And that's what Christine Lagarde and these other folks at the IMF have failed to come to terms with. There's a huge problem in the banking sector. In their core, they are as dead as a corpse.
Dead as corpses. This all comes after Europe breathed a sigh of relief over Greece, which formed a pro-bailout government after weeks of uncertainty. What do you make of the timing?
The timing makes no difference because starting in 2007, 2008, you had what's called in economics a Minsky moment, where the global indebtedness reached a critical amount of no amount of stimulus or any kind of policy changes would change the fact that the globe is embarking on this massive global deleveraging, which is going to end in massive defaults in banks across Europe and across the world. These major banks in Europe are technically insolvent. Deutsche Bank is insolvent. BNP is insolvent. Societe Generale is insolvent. JP Morgan, insolvent. And, of course, Lloyd Blankfein, who's here at the conference in St. Petersburg, his bank, Goldman Sachs, is also insolvent.
Now, this downgrade could raise the borrowing costs for banks, but could it also help the politicians push through their agenda of global financial governance?
Well, they, of course, will use this opportunity to put forward more global governance, more centralized government, more command and control, more state-run operations, less democracy, less market activity, less free competition. So all of those things are being displaced by state-controlled, command and controlled, bank and fascist relationship with governments, and that's growing to the detriment of people in Greece who are now suffering the real consequences. People are dying in the street. They can't afford health care. They can't afford food. That's the result of this incredible kleptocracy that has destroyed the global banking system. And nobody, particularly in America, particularly Barack Obama and his administration, are doing anything about it.
Now, the leaders of the Eurozone's four biggest economies are meeting in Rome, with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti saying there's 1 week left to save the Eurozone. But after years of failing to deal with the crisis, is 1 week enough to perform some kind of rescue? A miracle, maybe?
Well, how many times are we going to hear this hijacking scenario where some technocrat like Mario Monti puts a gun to the people's head and say, either give us all your money or we're going to take all your assets. They're going to do it anyway. So why not form some kind of resistance against this global occupation by bankers? You know, the people have to stand up and realize that no one's going to help them but themselves. They need to push out the kleptocrats and the banking terrorists, as I call them, and stand up for themselves. Until they do something for themselves, no one's going to do anything for them.
Well, thank you very much there. Max Kaiser, economic expert and host of the Kaiser Report here on RT. Thanks for talking to us.
Interesting times, that's for sure. What I would like to do now is also just talk a little bit briefly about, it's always great to talk about the doom and gloom kind of side of it, but hopefully you can also see there's a certain degree of satisfaction from the positive side that you get by at least knowing what's going on. And at least now we can start to understand that we're starting to really know what's going on and what we're doing about it. So in terms of our organization, we started a non-profit organization to deal specifically with these matters in South Africa under the complete disillusion that there were other organizations that could actually help us, like the Bank Ombudsman and Registrar of Banks, etc., etc. None of them can do anything. Seriously, we always say that every time we go to a meeting and they send us a letter, it's one letter closer to the Constitutional Court. Well, one rejection letter closer to the Constitutional Court. So we just keep getting rejection letters all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to get there one way or another, because at some stage, the most senior people who are supposedly in power are going to have to start rebutting or counter-arguing the arguments that we're putting forward. Because as far as I've seen, everything today that I've shown you is evidence. That's all it really is. How conclusive that evidence is obviously up to you as individuals. But in terms of now how do we bring that to a court, which is in their own system, which has itself is the most twisted, ridiculous, it's just crazy stuff to try and get certain things done, to go through the legal system with costs and expenses and rules and all this. It's just this web of just total uncertainty. It's extremely difficult to do. But that's essentially what we're doing on this side. But on the other side, it's really important that we all start looking and saying, what do we want to do about it as human beings, as people? Are we going to go back home and just carry on doing what we're doing? Or are we going to start changing? And if we are starting to change, how can we change? What I'd like to do now is to show you through a few pictures on a group of us, and actually start an eco-community as an example. And I'm just going to run through this relatively quickly, because it's mainly photographs, which is nice, so you can kind of sit back and relax. The point is this. Whether it works or not, or is working or may work in the future, is not as relevant as let's do something. That's more important than anything. Let's start trying alternatives. We need to start looking differently and doing differently. It's one thing to think differently, and it's another thing to actually go out and do it. So, in terms of what we're trying to do at Five Streams, it's divided into two sections. The philosophy. We call it me and we call it we. Now the whole idea is how are the individual's needs balanced with those of the community? Because there's a difference between commune and community. You guys know what commune is like. When you all have to share half a towel and a toothbrush. There's a difference between community and commune. And it's how you balance the needs of the individuals with the needs of the community. And in between is actually where the true community happens. So in terms of what Five Streams is, roughly a hectare of land, the opportunity to build on a hectare is a legacy. You can run a business from it if you wish, live happily, all those wonderful things that you want as an individual in terms of your own private space. On the other hand, the farm itself is sustainable. In other words, the farm does not need individuals to make it happen. I know this sounds a bit weird. In other words, one of the problems with sustainable communities is that if there's 5 people and 4 of them do the work and the other one wants something in return, the 4 of them get upset with the other one because he never did any work, so he should not be entitled to anything. And fighting and conflict starts to occur. The way we get around that is to actually hire staff. So we have a full-time manager, we have staff, we have gardens and auction, water, and everybody can share on it. So there's no fighting over that element of it. And then as we start growing the things for the community, everybody can partake in it. So what you do on your hectare is completely up to you. But the farm is going to carry on growing regardless. And eventually, hopefully, the two of them will start coming together. This is like one of the views that we have on the mountain. That is now a house being built just about there.
Where is it?
The Natal Midlands. Like during winter, figure let's show a photo of it when it's now. So that's actually happening. Also happening now with the fire breaks. But it essentially shows you where it is. Dam started building a labyrinth plantation. They said you can't grow anything out there. It's very difficult to grow. If anyone says you can't grow anything, it's impossible to grow. Do we have any gardeners here? I was looking. Can you grow things where it's impossible to grow? Yes, thank you very much. Okay, that's impossible. It's possible. So we started growing it, and it was a little bit of fun. It started really blossoming. Everything there is edible, by the way. It's a portal to another world. Some tunneling in winter. Local wildlife. A few pigs, a few local indigenous cows. Zulu sheep. Do you guys know about Zulu sheep? Anyone, eh? You know that there's Zulu sheep that have been around for, I don't know, they migrated from somewhere up north, I don't know, thousands of years ago, I think. They're highly endangered, unfortunately. And you can only really get these sheep if you're given them. It's very difficult to buy them. You can buy them, but usually they have to be given as a gift and looked after. And getting those sheep is actually quite a special thing. They're actually local, indigenous South African sheep. They're very cute. Those aren't actually ours. We do have about 6 of them, but we couldn't get a good enough photo. We have our own water source as well, because if you've got clear water, you can do anything. Water's the lifeblood of any sustainable community. Another nice one. What's really nice about our water source is it literally comes out of the ground on our property, travels down, and every now and again it disappears underground again and then comes up. Starting to build some of the houses. The whole idea is we just build with what we can. We actually build these with steel frames, but we regret that now. We should have known what we do now. We can actually build that with gum poles. I tell you what, if you know what you're doing with building, you can build so cheaply and so effectively. We made a few mistakes and ended up costing us a lot more than we had hoped. But I mean, at least we're doing it. That's my philosophy anyway. Just do something. Poo with a view. Oh yeah, sandbags are great. There's actually some sandbags in there, and there's another family that's building with sandbags now as well. That was an absolutely dilapidated nightmare, and then Les and Rob went and fixed it up and refurnished it. It was awful. It was an existing structure that had just been, it was really, it was a strange, awful. The waterfall, the kids playing, we had an orchard. These fruit trees had never given off fruit for, they don't even know how many years. We rehabilitated them, and they just gave off so much fruit we didn't even know what to do with it. Planting a few more fruit trees. Cutting, there's a whole wattle forest. There's unfortunately a lot of wattle issues. So by the gorge, so what we did was we literally cut a path. We call it the magic forest now. And you can literally walk probably almost a kilometer now, winding your way through the river. It's really awesome. You couldn't even access it before, so it's all been hacked. And these beautiful little paths that we've created. No, we use septic tanks, yeah. Or there's also bioelectric filters, which are very interesting. Aerobic filters, which actually allow plants to process.
Wattle is also used for helping to clear human.
Yeah, I'm sure. Possibly, yeah. There's actually a lot of.
Don't throw away what you're packing down.
Oh yeah, no, we do use it, yeah, and especially for building, because we can build with wattle and daub as well. There's an example of where that was completely the forest. So the whole idea is that we just bought the place and said, let's just do everything we can with it. Built a little switch lodge, started building. These are new. These are almost finished now. These little hex houses, these little chalet, little pyramid. Also labyrinth that we created, that Les did, that she just added to it. We also we came with a main house, so we have which we've turned into a guest house, so we can have people come and stay. It's got underfloor heating, so it's still on the grid. One day, the plan is important. Our intention is to go off the grid. If it happens now, in 10 years' time, it doesn't matter. We all have that intention. So rather than jumping across immediately into the unknown too much, we're saying we'll just do it when we can. So there's no rules or community this or hectic stuff that you have to abide by or all that kind of stuff. Everybody just does what they feel they need to do, and if they do nothing, so be it. There's no crime for doing nothing. We've had a couple of workshops there and some people over. It's been really cool. And yeah, yep, we had snow. I told you my girlfriend was a jeweler. She is also decided to do a wrought iron course, and she learned how to make this in a couple of weeks. Beautiful. She learned very quickly. Got that. Really awesome. Cool, guys. So that's 5 streams. The reason why I wanted to talk about that is because of this whole exist. And it was nice when people said, if someone says you can't grow here, you can grow here. If someone says you can't build here, you can build here. So these concepts and these structures really, really do exist. And another example is alternative currencies, because alternative currencies have been really suppressed. We just can't get the money. In America, you've got what's it called, bitcoins, and there's so many of these alternative currencies, and they're just not getting going. And as soon as you take deposits of ordinary money, literally black helicopters start circling, and they cut you down. So you're not really going to get too much exposure about it. You're certainly not going to get funding from an alternative currency. It's very, very difficult to make it work. And I'm also very happy to announce that there's a few people here tonight that actually came from an alternative currency, which was accepted in talents from the CES. Where's Tim around? Where is he? He's still here. Well done, Tim. And Dawn. Who's Dawn? Is she not here today, huh? Who's here from that, by the way? Who's paid with talent? Oh, there's actually quite... Is that many? No, that's great. No. Look, the important thing is that this was an idea that Brendan John Nash said to me, and he said, "Listen, why don't you just offer to do a course in an alternative currency and see if it works?" And I thought, well, why not? I mean, you can't preach it and not practice it. And bang, you guys are all here today, which is really lekker. Hey? So thanks for it, and definitely contributing in every way. And it's really cool because now I've got an alternative currency that I can go and spend, which is really, really cool. So Tim, well done for setting it up. How many members have you got now?
Well, there's nearly 5,000 in Cape Town.
5,000 in Cape Town.
30,000 around the world.
5,000 in Cape Town and 30,000 around the world. Beautiful. And how many merchants? Or is each individual a merchant? So every person's a merchant. So everybody's got something to contribute to the scheme. And if I'm not mistaken, it works on when you first join and you don't have any talents, you can spend talents you don't have, going negative up to a certain point, and then you can earn them back later. Is that right? And what's the negative limit?
Well, each group is different, but in Cape Town, I think our limit is 500.
Okay.
In other places, it's different.
500. Well, that's interesting. So if you came and you paid 100 or 200 talents today, technically speaking, it could have wiped out a significant portion of your bank account. So that's important because it just shows to show you that it's not like people have arrived here tonight and said, "I'll just pay with some funny money." It's legitimate. You actually are, what's the word? You are contributing. And I think it's important for alternative currencies to have that notion that when you do pay an alternative currency, you do feel like you're spending something and you do want to give back. Am I right? You guys who've done that. So absolutely, I really fully encourage and I commend, Tim, what you've done there. And I think we are really well done. And here we have an alternative currency in Cape Town. Bravo.
Do they know where to go to join? Yeah, I think your last email you sent a link, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
I went and had a look at it. I actually had a look at what it was all about, and then I saw there was one in the Halstead Basin. But I was it's on your email.
I'll make all this available, and some of those little clips I showed you were part of bigger clips. I'll have all of that stuff available for you, so you can start researching and really getting under this. We're going to be filing a lot of the document that I sent you, went through to today. A lot of those issues are going to be discussed in the next court case. That's High Court action, where New Era. So instead of working with somebody like Michael Tellinger and helping him with his case, New Era as an NPO is going to take summons to all the banks. We're literally going to serve a summons on all the banks and start looking to try and get all of the stuff heard and being declared illegal. That's hopefully going to follow on, hopefully sooner rather than later, with a class action where a lot of people can then join. And we literally take on the banks as a huge group. That's really what we want to get into.
How do we get behind, or how do I get the word out? What would you say would be...
How can we say? Although there's a lot of information about this kind of stuff, it doesn't really go into detail about how its application is. Now, I mentioned earlier before about this legal system and how that you've got judges in black cloaks praying for judgment to a man they call Lord, etc., etc. And you start to look at this and you cannot understand what's going on. And when you start to realize that the courts are, in the UK, they call them courts of equity. In other words, they're all about money. Everything is about money. Now, if the government creates a new statute, a new act of parliament, what is that really? It's just another little business, isn't it? A business that's got to be funded, a business that's going to need staff, it's going to need enforcement, it's going to employ. Every time the government creates a new statute, it's more money. The courts that are here to enforce those statutes and our laws are really just about distribution of money. It's who owes who money. So that starts to ask, you've got to start asking yourself a serious question. What really are acts of parliament? Aren't they really just secret financial transactions? Is that sounding a little bit wacky?
No.
Do you know what I mean? So we start to look at laws differently, because remember, there's law and there's law. There's law that says if I go and decide to stroke a baby rhino in the bush, there's a very, very good chance that mom and dad are going to be a little bit upset with me. And they're not going to ask me, do I have health insurance before charging? That's natural law. Natural law. It's very simple. Don't hurt. don't steal, and don't cheat. That's really what it is. And if you think about it, what laws don't fall into those three categories? Don't hurt, don't steal, don't cheat. It's very simple. And that's natural law, the law of the land. Then along came these codification type systems where laws started to get written down. And these courts were created. But by the same token, money is not what it used to be. The banking system has changed. We all think it's exactly the same. People who've worked in banking for decades think it's exactly the same, but it's changed. So is it not possible that the entire court system has changed as well? Where do we get justice? Are you going to put it back on? Okay. Apparently I need both my hands. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we're in this interesting situation now, because now we start looking at courts, and I must say, when I started hearing this knowledge, it made sense to me, but I'd never really seen it in action before. I honestly believe that when you go in front of a judge, that judge is going to dispense with justice. Really. He's going to look at the facts and go, no, you know what, I can see you've been aggrieved. I can see the facts of the matter, you've been duped, This is an issue, and yeah, now I'm going to resolve it. It doesn't work like that at all. Basically, what it works out is who owes who money, what rule has been broken, has this rule been broken or not? If so, can you prove it? It's got to the point where it was absolutely fascinating, where a sheriff had arrived to my house to take with a judgment, with a warrant of execution. The sheriff walked in the house and then basically walked out. Said a few words. I won't go into all the detail. But on the sheriff's return of service, he actually wrote on that return of service that he arrived at just after 6 o'clock in the morning, that he had a long conversation with me, that he searched the house for my assets. He didn't do any of that stuff, because if he had, the outcome would have been very different. And it just so happened that he arrived at 12 o'clock midday, and I was having a meeting with all the other new Economic Rights Alliance directors. I even got supporting affidavits. I got 3 supporting affidavits from the new Economic Rights Alliance directors, attesting to what I had said. Now, when it basically went into a court, my advocate ended up, I should have done it myself. If I'd done it everything up to myself up until this point, I got scared, and I said, let's let a proper guy do it because my case is strong enough. I actually employed senior counsel, an SC, to do this for me. He said, we're not going to argue that. He said, we're going to argue the fact that the sequestration should never have happened in the first place, which is a good argument, right? The thing is that by not arguing the sheriff's certificate, it immediately said what the sheriff wrote on that was true. So the opposing advocate stood up and basically said that this is the truth, read from the sheriff, if it's truth in court, knowing full well that it could never have been true. All the affidavits had been filed. It clearly wasn't true, but he was able to stand up and say it anyway because it was not going to be part of the argument that our other advocate had agreed to argue it. So that point was ludicrous. So then obviously our advocate then decided he's going to go for his side of the story. He's going to argue it, but the judge ended up not agreeing with him. So although this was to try and sequestrate me behind my back, it's a hell of a long story. I'm not going to go into it. And I'm completely solvent, which is the irony of the whole situation. So essentially what happened was the judge ended up saying, no, I've got to pay X amount, okay, which is cool. I've never had a problem with paying it anyway. It was never an issue. But I have to pay all their court costs. So because we didn't have one part of the focus of our argument, which in my opinion, we should have gone, the point that I'm trying to make is that if you go to court with all the facts, that's not how it works. You've got to pick like one little fact that you think is going to win your case, and it's so much more, as Michael Tellinger would say, deeply convoluted, that the justice system is just not there anymore. And literally the judge pulled out his pen and his pencil, and he started working out the amounts, what the interest was, exactly like any banker would do. And if you read even a tiny bit of the facts, it was so completely ridiculous how these guys even tried to sequestrate me in the first place. It was nonsense. Literally, I had asked them 3 times to tell me if there was even a judgment or any papers. They ignored all my correspondence. There was a whole process. They just completely ignored me. Then went behind my back and nearly took sequestration without me even knowing about it, It was purely by luck that I had to get a phone call a couple of days before the hearing from a lady doing data capture. It was nonsense. I mean, anybody who read it, and I submitted all those papers to the judge, all of which was ignored because the advocate only focused on one particular aspect of the case. That's essentially where we at with the system. So now that means to go up and argue a lot of the things we want to argue, justice and rights and constitutionality and all that kind of stuff, is way, way more complicated than we think. And that means work within the system is much more difficult than we think it is going to be. Because now we've got to play by their rules. So just to tell you about how things are working, what I've told you about and what the new economic rights alliance is about, this is about a non-profit organization who's working within the rules. Okay, within the system's rules to make change. However, from a personal standpoint, I don't know how long it's going to take before we can get change, or even if it's ever going to work. Therefore, the reason I'm also doing these seminars and giving this information out, we need to look at alternatives. We have to do these alternatives. Whether they're alternative currencies, alternative ways of thinking, etc., etc., it's hectic. Because what we're looking at now is not just incompetence. It's deliberate. It is absolutely deliberate, meticulously crafted, conniving ways of literally parting us with everything that we own. And it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. The sun is starting to set and there's no space left to put chairs. It's really deep, guys. It's really deep and hectic, yeah?